All right. So, you know how we're always talking about smarter ways to learn new things,
Yeah.
ways to kind of pick up skills without feeling like you're stuck in a classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you guys shared some really cool ideas, actually, about using podcasts specifically to, like, improve your English. And honestly, it's kind of brilliant when you think about it.
Right.
So that's what we're diving into today. How you can use audio to sharpen your listening skills, build up your vocabulary, even get your pronunciation down.
Definitely. And what's really interesting right from the start is how different this is to those more like traditional methods, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about textbooks, the language is sometimes a bit stiff, not how people really talk every day.
Yeah.
And classrooms, well, they have their place, but speaking up in front of others can be a bit scary for some people.
Yeah, for sure.
Podcasts, though, they're different. They totally immerse you in real spoken English.
Right.
You hear actual conversations, different accents, all those tiny little things that get missed in formal learning. And the convenience. Come on, it's unbeatable.
Yeah. Another huge point you brought up, learning on the go, your commute, at the gym, even just chilling at home.
Exactly.
Instead of music, you could be tuning your ear to English.
Totally.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Some practical ways to make the most of this. The first strategy was all about choosing the right podcasts, the right ones for you.
And this is really the foundation. It's like trying to learn to swim by jumping in the deep end. You got to find podcasts that match where you are in your English learning journey.
Makes sense.
If you're just starting out, look for podcasts specifically made for beginners.
Okay.
They use simpler language and speak slower.
Got it.
But if you're already comfortable, don't be afraid to explore podcasts on topics you're actually interested in.
Right. We even saw suggestions to specifically search for English learning podcasts.
Yeah.
But then it also highlighted something really smart. Using your passions to your advantage.
Absolutely.
Like if you love science, find a science podcast in English. History buff. Tons of history podcasts out there.
Exactly. The idea is when you're genuinely into the subject, the learning just happens naturally.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a chore then.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. Some research actually shows that when you're emotionally connected to what you're learning, you remember new words and ideas much better.
That's so true.
So by picking podcasts, you're kind of tapping into this secret learning weapon.
It's all about that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
When you're genuinely interested, you pay more attention, naturally pick up new words, and stick with it over time.
Yeah.
It turns learning English from a have to into a want to.
I love that. Okay, so you found your perfect podcast. You hit play. What next?
Okay.
Well, the second strategy really highlighted the difference between passive listening and active listening.
Yeah.
And that feels like a really important thing to grasp.
It is. It's easy to just have a podcast on in the background while you're doing something else.
Uh-huh.
But while that might give you some exposure, it's probably not going to get you fluent. Okay?
Active listening, though, that needs your full attention. It means really focusing on the words, how they're used, and the overall message.
Yeah.
Think of it as making your brain work with the audio.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, the material we looked at had some good tips, like zeroing in on specific words and phrases and how the speaker pronounces them.
Mm-hmm.
And this tip about pausing, rewinding, re-listening when you miss something. That's gold. There's no need to get everything perfect the first time.
Right.
It's about you taking control of the listening.
Okay.
And trying to figure out the meaning of new words from the context before you look them up.
Yeah.
Genius. It makes your brain work things out, which helps you remember those words later.
And then there was this shadowing technique.
Oh, yeah.
That seemed pretty cool.
What's really cool about shadowing is how it tackles pronunciation and fluency head on.
How so?
You listen to a sentence or a phrase, and then you immediately repeat it. Try to copy the speaker's intonation, the way their voice rises and falls.
Their rhythm and even those tiny pauses. It's like your voice is learning by mimicking.
That's me.
It might feel a little awkward at first, talking along with the podcast, but it's super effective for getting the feel of natural speech and improving your pronunciation.
So you're actively listening, maybe even trying some shadowing.
Right.
What's the next step? How do we make sure this stuff sticks?
Good question. The research highlighted taking notes and building your vocabulary.
Cool.
This is where you move past just hearing the language and start to make it real. When you hear a new word or expression, write it down.
Okay.
And make a note of where you heard it, the context.
Right.
The material also talked about writing down the meaning and even coming up with your own examples. This helps you see how those new words work in real conversations.
That's helpful. And for visual learners, flashcards seem like a good way to go.
Yeah.
Whether it's the old school ones or apps like Anki or Quizlet.
Right.
Seems like a good way to really drill that new vocabulary in and make sure it sticks long term. It's about that spaced repetition, isn't it?
Exactly. Reviewing things over and over again, but with longer breaks in between, helps move that knowledge into your long-term memory.
And if we zoom out for a second, it's like you're constantly building your language toolkit.
Precisely.
Every new word or phrase you learn opens up your ability to understand and speak English better.
For sure.
It's a step-by-step process, but it's powerful. Okay, so we've talked about listening, building vocabulary.
Right.
But the material was really clear that you got to actually speak the language too.
Of course, you can understand a lot of words. That's your passive vocabulary. But to be truly fluent and confident, you need to use those words, actually speak.
Yeah.
The research gave us some great ways to practice.
Like what?
Like summarizing. You listen to a bit of a podcast, hit pause, and then you try to say what you heard in your own words.
I like that.
It's a fantastic way to not only test if you understood, but also to start thinking in English.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
What's really valuable is it forces you to process the information and then say it again using your own language. This really strengthens your ability to build sentences and express your thoughts in English more naturally.
And then there's the role-playing idea.
Right.
That sounds fun.
This one's even more active and immersive.
Okay.
You pick a podcast with a conversation between a couple of people, and you take on the role of one of the speakers.
Okay.
You respond as if you were actually in the conversation.
Interesting.
It might feel a little strange at first talking to your headphones, but it's a great way to practice your pronunciation, how you structure sentences, and your conversational flow, all in a relaxed setting.
Right. No pressure.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered choosing the right podcasts, active listening, building vocabulary, and practicing speaking.
Yeah, it feels like we've got a good toolbox going.
We do.
But like with Annie's skill, consistency seems to be king.
Totally.
The last strategy was all about making it a daily habit.
This is key. Learning a language isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Even short, regular sessions are way more effective than doing it for hours once in a blue moon.
Right.
The material suggested setting aside just 15-30 minutes every day for listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
Think about those times you've got a few minutes free, your commute, waiting in line, even right before bed.
Okay.
Consistency is the magic ingredient.
And that idea of keeping a journal, writing down new words, phrases, even how well you understood each day.
Right.
Seems like a good way to stay motivated and actually see how far you've come.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's hard to notice those small wins every day, but seeing them written down can be a real boost.
For sure.
And that brings us to a really important question. How do you stay motivated in the long run?
Yeah.
It often comes down to that sense of achievement, of seeing real progress.
Makes sense.
By tracking your journey, you're creating this record of your effort and how much you've grown.
Yeah.
And that can fuel you to keep going and stay engaged.
So to recap those 5 smart ways to learn English with podcasts. First, pick podcasts that match your level and what you actually find interesting.
Right.
Second, actively listen. Really focus and engage with what you're hearing.
Uh-huh.
Third, take notes and build your vocabulary in a structured way.
Yes.
Fourth, practice speaking by summarizing what you hear and even trying out some role-playing.
Love it.
And fifth, make it a habit, even if it's just for a little bit each day.
What becomes clear when you look at these strategies all together is how they work hand in hand. It's not just passively soaking up info. It's about actively engaging with the language in multiple ways, listening closely, understanding deeply, taking notes, and then actually using what you've learned by speaking. That multi-pronged approach is what makes learning with podcasts so effective.
And the material really emphasized that learning English should be enjoyable.
For sure.
The more you enjoy it, the faster you'll pick it up.
Absolutely.
And podcasts offer a fun, flexible, and super accessible way to do just that. So the takeaway here is clear. Start today. Find a podcast that piques your interest and give some of these strategies a shot.
What's great is how personalized it can be. You get to design your own learning experience by picking content that speaks to you, learn at your own speed, and fit it into your routine in a way that works for you.
We'd love to hear about your experiences with this. If you give learning English with podcasts a try, or if you're already doing it, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah.
Tell us what podcast you're listening to and which of these strategies you find most helpful. Sharing your insights and tips could really help out other listeners in our community who are also on this language learning journey.
Think of this as your jumping off point.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of English language podcasts out there just waiting to be discovered.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, please give it a like and share it with anyone you know who might find this approach useful.
Definitely.
The more people we can help learn and grow, the better.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us today. And remember to leave your comments and share this